To help overcome the problems associated with the current computation of the federal poverty line, which doesn't vary by state, there's a joint effort by the Census Bureau and the Bureau of Labor Statistics to develop a new measure. This new measure would be more encompassing, including things like cost of living, government benefits that individuals already receive or are eligible for, and geographic variations, including things like labor supply, jobs that are available, industries present, etc. What do you think about this idea? Would this be better than the federal poverty line as we use it today? Another way we can think about poverty is the distribution of wealth in a society. You hear a lot in the news and from politicians about the top 1% in the United States, how they earn 22% of all US income, how the top 20% earns more than half of the US income. And yet, if you think about the bottom 20% or the last quintile of the population, they only earn about 3.2% of the US income. So you can think about what proportions of the population thus earn a certain percentage of income in the United States. Why then are these proportions or the distribution of wealth in the United States important? Well, it helps us to understand measures of equality and inequality. This helps us to compute a measure of what we call a Gini coefficient, which is nothing more than a representation of the statistical dispersion of income across a nation's residents. Basically, the way to think about the Gini coefficient is this. If we think about the proportion of a population in a country and the distribution of wealth, what would an equal distribution look like? Well, for each 1% of the population you consider, they should hold 1% of the income in that country. Thus, 2% would hold another one, 3% would hold another one, all the way up till when you've considered all 100% of the population, all 100% of the income is accounted for. No one group or percentage of the population would hold a larger share of the income than another. Yet, we know this isn't the case. Again, the top 1% of the population hold more than 20% of all income in it. So thus the Gini coefficient allows us to compare one country to another in terms of income inequality. It ranges from 0 to 1. It is nothing more than the difference between that perfectly equal society of essentially 1% income being held by 1% of the population, etc., 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 and the difference between that and where the country actually is. Thus, on the Gini coefficient index, countries that are closer to 0 or have a low measure on the Gini coefficient have greater equity of wealth. However, as wealth becomes concentrated in the hands of a few individuals or a smaller percentage of the population, you increase yourself on the Gini coefficient, getting closer to that 1, and ultimately being less equal in income. Thus, the takeaway when we think about the Gini coefficient, as well as the distribution of wealth in the United States, is that over time, our Gini coefficient has been rising and moving closer to that 1, which means that essentially we are becoming less equal in terms of the distribution of wealth. If we take this Gini coefficient and apply it to all countries of the world, you can see the distribution between equal and unequal societies in terms of the distribution of wealth. Take a look at these countries of the world. Which are the ones that are closer to the 0 of the Gini coefficient, or having a more equal society in terms of the distribution of wealth? Further, which countries are closer to that 1, the top end of the Gini coefficient, which means there's a greater inequity of wealth in their society? Does this surprise you?